Entrepreneurs Enigma is a podcast for the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, so the wins and the fails that we all face being entrepreneurs, and how we learn from adversity. Every week I talk to a different entrepreneur with a story to tell. I'm Seth Goldstein. Come with me on the journey. This is Entrepreneurs Enigma. Let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Entrepreneurs Enigma podcast. I am your host as always, Seth. Today I have a consummate entrepreneur. He's been an entrepreneur for 30 years, and that's incredible. I've been an entrepreneur for 16. That seems like way too much as it is, but 30 years. Kieron James is here with me today, straight from gorgeous, sunny Spain, but he isn't Spanish, he's English, but he's smart and gets away from all the dreariness that is in England and goes to Spain. So it's been nice. But though he has said, that recently there has been some rubbish, which is a very British term, rubbish weather. So, hey, Kieron, how's it going, buddy? How you doing?
Very, very well. Thank you for having me, Seth. Good to be on board. 30 years, yeah. I just need to point out I started at school, just in case. Anyway,
okay,
I'm joking. And we split our time now between here and London, so I'm kind of 50% here. And
so you get the best of both worlds.
Yeah,
best of both worlds, which is nice.
Exactly.
That's kind of handy. So you have scaled start businesses in the ICT sector, which is what? What is ICT?
Information communication technology. So broadly dealing in zeros and ones for the best part of those 30 years. I had one quick venture into selling physical product, but it didn't work out very well for me. So I've always stuck to
mostly binary, right? Ones and zeros. Ones and zeros.
Much easier.
Exactly. And now you are the CEO and founder of Wonderful.
That's right.
And it is at wonderful.co.uk. So you've actually got a really cool domain name, which is cool. And it provides simple, fast, secure payments, instant bank payment technology. Essentially, it's non-evil payment processing, which is get it, wonderful. And then but this all started when you had a nonprofit. It's a nonprofit, wonderful.org, where it's essentially fundraising without the fees.
That's right. So yeah, it's been quite a circuitous journey into what we're doing today. But it started life. We used to call the project back in 2016 when we started the side hustle without the hustle. So that was the fundraising platform. We made no money from it. It was 100% philanthropic. It was a great thing for the devs to be involved in. So they enjoyed giving up lunch breaks and coffee time to build a website that was completely about giving back.
That's awesome.
That created a bit of a success paradox because obviously the charities loved it, but as it grew,
of course,
all of the money that we got from our corporate sponsors just went to paying card processing fees. So we ended up in this situation where we thought, well, we've got this really low ceiling now on our impact and reach. We need to remove it because otherwise we're going to be stuck serving this number of charities and we can't go any further. So we found the solution in open banking and consequently sold the day job business, which was telecoms at the time, and moved everybody from that side hustle without the hustle into a full-time payments fintech business.
Yeah. So what is open banking? I mean, versus closed banking. I mean, that's a term that I don't think a lot of people understand. So explain that.
Absolutely. And so it's a bit of an unfortunate name because if you're a user of open banking, it's probably the last thing you want is for your bank to be open from a security point of view. But actually, open banking describes the open APIs. So back around the time we kicked off the fundraising platform, the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK wanted to open up innovation in the financial sector. They basically told all the banks all the bigger banks to make their APIs accessible for authorized fintechs like us. That basically allows us, with the consent of the consumer, to move money directly from the consumer's account to the retailer's account with no other intermediaries. Wow. So basically taking probably about a dozen people
on steroids. So ACH on steroids.
Exactly. So instant settlement, and incredibly cheap because you remove all of those people and you can settle anytime 24/7.
That won't happen in America very soon. I know there is a push for open banking in America, but Bureaucracy. That's all I gotta say. I mean, England's known for their bureaucracy too. I mean, come on, have you ever seen Parliament?
Oh,
They throw stuff at each other.
without a doubt, without a doubt. But I think what we do
Without
have
a doubt.
in the UK, which has been great, is kind of a progressive regulator in this sector. So really keen to stimulate that kind of innovation. And it's a great outcome for the end users, because we all use debit cards and credit cards, and when you're paying with one of those, you kind of think, well, that was pretty straightforward. But what you're not understanding a lot of the time is just the costs involved and the settlement times for the merchant. And whilst the merchant's picking up the tab for all of that, invariably they're going to hand that back to you as the customer, in increased prices. They're not going to just say, okay, that's fine. That's what it costs us.
Or there's actually a growing trend in America where they're allowed to charge the 4% back.
Right.
So if you pay with cash, it's cheaper than if you pay with card, which I think's kind of a little rotten. People pay me by credit card. I eat the fee. I incorporate it into the cost of doing business essentially. But then I also went to a Greek restaurant in my town recently, and they said if you pay with cash, we'll give you 10% off your order. Instead of them saying if you have to use credit card, you gotta use credit card. Fine, it's gonna be this price. But they did a more positive spin on it, saying we'll give you 10%, which is more than they would. They're losing more on that, but they're getting cash.
Exactly.
Than if they were just to charge you 4% more, which is more negative in my mind against consumers.
And I think that's a really good example of what you can do with those savings. A lot of people go, because 4% that seems really steep. Here in the UK, typically you're about 1.4%. And 20 pence, so there'll be a flat percent, pence per transaction.
I might be wrong with 4%. I might be wrong with the 4%. Yeah. I think, but it might be off on the 4%, or they might be saying like it's going to be 4% because it's. I remember seeing 4%. I'm like, that's a lot, but.
But the thing about that is, everyone looks at that and goes, "Oh well, it's only 1.4%. It's not that much." But when you take that, you see, that's the percentage of your revenue coming in. But if you take that as a percentage of your net profit, then by our calculations, you're up to kind of 18-20% of a small business's net profit just to get paid, literally to get the money from the consumer into their account. It's nuts.
Yeah, I think QuickBooks actually is 1.3.
Right.
I think that's the reason why I do it through QuickBooks. I don't do it through another payment processor because QuickBooks, they're getting you every which way.
Yeah.
So they're like, we can afford it. We're going to take a quick break, hear from our sponsors, and get right back to the show. Give you a lower rate on your credit card processing because we got you on everything else. The whole QuickBooks Online fee every month, versus, so they get you everywhere else, so they can do it a little bit lower.
Absolutely.
So you were doing the side hustle.
Yeah.
You saw the benefit of making open banking a reality. So you're doing it really on the cheap, which is good on the payment processing side of things, because you're able to, because in the UK, open banking is a thing. Are you only in the UK? Are you international or not?
Currently, we're only in the UK. We've got about 5.5 million small businesses in the UK to go at. Not using us yet. That's the size and potential market for us, which is huge. And I think there's, it doesn't matter really how you're receiving money. If you're getting paid, then it makes sense to use open banking. So we'll focus very much on that. There's a lot of the UK blazed the trail with this, and I think there are now 60 jurisdictions that have kind of emulated what we're doing around the world. So there's plenty of market to go at. I'm with you.
There's a lot in the UK to go at. Like in the UK, it's not a big country, but you think about it. What did you say? 550 million?
5.5 million. 5.5 million SMEs.
5.5 million on a small country, and that's a good portion. That's a good nut to crack.
Absolutely.
That's great.
So we'll kind of hit those by integrating with as many e-commerce platforms. So we're currently live on WooCommerce, for example. You can just add us to the payment at checkout as one of those options to pay. And then we'll just roll out similarly with as many of those platforms as we can, and then accountancy platforms. And then we'll look at the international markets. So we're kind of waiting a little bit for some of those countries to play catch up with the regulation, but we're pretty confident that's going to happen.
That's going to be awesome. So you'll grow with them. So you've been an entrepreneur for literally 30 years. Mm-hmm. What is the best thing that's in your mind being an entrepreneur? Like, what's the best thing about being an entrepreneur?
I love the freedom. I love this kind of phase, particularly right now, where you're doing all of the really exciting, innovative things with technology. I love kind of exploring how regulatory changes create opportunity, because a lot of people look at regulation when we were in telecoms, and regulation right at the center of all of that, and they see that as being a blocker to innovation. And we've always just thought it's the exact opposite, because one business's barrier to entry is another business's opportunity, and that's the way I've always looked at regulation. So we kind of always try to look at emerging trends and see what's on the horizon. Whether you mentioned the domain name that was registered out of Nominet, our UK domain name registrar, in 1998, and we've been kind of sitting there thinking, what can we do with that?
There you go.
Wonderful.org was probably bought 18 months later. So again, those domain names were back in the day when we were doing domain name registration. Then we moved into company formations online. We've done online telephony. We've done payments. We've done abandoned cart software.
So you're experienced in this realm. So it makes sense that this kind of it moved in a logical transition from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. So what keeps you up at night as an entrepreneur, or not much? I mean, are you at the point in your entrepreneur journey that you're not stressing the small stuff, or are you
no, for sure. I think one of the things that struck me the other day was that you'd never really get away, even after all these years, from that imposter syndrome. You still think there's stuff that I'm pretending I'm doing here, and I'm not really qualified to do it. And actually, there were 6 words said to me by one of my colleagues the other day, which really resonated, because you do feel like you've got to be able to do the marketing, you've got to be able to do the finance, you've got to be able to do the technical stuff, you've got to be able to. And my finance manager asked me a question, I didn't know the answer, and I went, I should know. I'm really embarrassed. And she went, Kieron, that's what you pay me for. And those 6 words just kind of gave me that imposter syndrome relief for a moment. I thought, you know what, you're absolutely right. That is what I pay you for. Let me just relax and not have to stress about everything.
But that's what it's all about, is you do what you're good at and you hire for the rest.
Completely. Yeah. I can't remember who said it. It was a smart comment. I fill my boardroom with smarter people than I am. That's the way I run the business. Probably Steve Jobs or someone like that, but it makes a lot
Probably Steve Jobs. I don't think Steve Jobs would have gone that far. Someone of that caliber would. I think Steve Jobs was like, it's all me. It's all me. Who knows? And then, so what is the most important thing to carry with you all the time?
What physical thing?
It can be physical. You can go as woo-woo as you want.
Okay, definitely my phone. I don't leave home without that. Who does these days? Because I think that's that point of connectivity. But also, I think just that notion in my head that it's okay to turn it off as well. That it is really important to take a break and step away from it all. So I will. There'll be few times, but there are times when I do turn off my email. I say, you've got my mobile number. Very rare that I'll turn it off completely, but email sometimes I turn off and just have a break.
You'll try. You'll try in this generation. It's great. So people can find you at wonderful.org and wonderful.co.uk, and then I'm sure you'll eventually get wonderful.everything else while you're at it. As you branch out into the world. But you're also, what's your favorite social media platform of choice?
Probably LinkedIn. So I'm LinkedIn, Kieron James, KieronJames. Feel free to connect there. And if you're remotely interested in any of the personal stuff, I've also got a blog at kieron.net, another domain name. There you go, KIERON.net.
But you're also a big traveler, so isn't that what your whole Kieron.net is all about, like your travels and stuff?
Yeah, to an extent. I think the focus now, it used to be a little while ago, I did a little bit more on travel, but more recently it's more on running and a little bit on the yoga and also the podcast. So it's the home for all those 3 things, really.
That's awesome. That's great. And we'll have all these in the show notes. And Kieron, thank you so much for being on.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks ever so much for the opportunity, Seth. I really appreciate it. You take care.
Awesome. And we'll see everyone next time. That was a great show. If you're enjoying Entrepreneurs Enigma, please review us in the podcast directory of your choice. Every review helps other podcast listeners find our show. If you're looking for other podcasts in the marketing space, look no further than the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcasts.net. Goldstein Media hopes you have enjoyed this episode.